Hey everybody, so this is our video for this final reflection letter. This is what we call a metacognitive task. Basically what that means is like, it's important that you learn for sure, but it's also important that you know that you learned, that you see your growth. So this gives you an opportunity to look back at the class and think about the ways in which maybe I've pushed you to think or write differently, the ways in which sort of the lectures have helped you think about writing in different ways, especially as you grow out of the 5 paragraph format that many of you learned in high school. So, the first thing I want to make sure I go over is these course goals or course outcomes. These come from the school and they're very important for understanding how we meet our objectives in each course. Here at Cascadia, we have it set into these um, sort of categories: learn actively, think critically, communicate with clarity, and interact in diverse and complex environments. Those are just big, broad categories. The course goals operate underneath them, and that's where you guys are going to be mining for sort of data. Um, so, read, analyze, and reflect on a variety of texts. If you just think back to that first section when you read, you know, Greek philosophy, European philosophy, outside of like more contemporary, outside of Greece, and that's Bacon. You know, Chinese philosophy. Uh, you're reading from a Armenian American in the turn of the century and his sort of religious philosophy. You read about Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. You read Asimov. So you've been dealing with a different bunch of texts. And here we just want to know how that helped you understand yourself better, how that helped you understand others like Adichie or like, Chinese philosophy. In my personal life, you guys may not know this, but I watch a lot of international TV, and I was just watching a show from China, and Taoism was a big part of the show and its philosophy. Um, so that's what in the world, like, how do you understand the world? Engage in discussion and group assignments. You guys are doing that right now. Use writing as a learning tool. So, writing for a lot of us writers is about the exploration of an idea through moving those ideas. So, if you think about a paper as like these benchmarks of logical progression, right? We have a thesis and we prove that thesis by breaking that thesis down into these logical, smaller arguments. Writing is a tool that we use to do that. It's actually a tool that every field uses to do that. When coders write, it's an iterative process, no different from what we're doing in our classes, where they write a piece of code, they test the code, they see where the bugs are in the code or how inefficient the code is, and then they keep working at it. Engineering is the same thing. Like, you learn about the previous designs all the way back to like Archimedes screws and Roman columns and bridges, and then you use that iterative nature of sort of human development to design new things with new materials and new stuff. And so writing is just a way in which we can do that because we put the ideas on paper and we read papers that came from before us. And that's just sort of the idea here, is that you were able to think about Brave New World by writing about it. You were able to think about Adichie by writing and reading about it. Um, Use a variety of rhetorical strategies. Here we can talk about like how each paper was a different genre, right? The first paper, reading reflection, was meant to look like an HR document. Here, this is actually meant to look like a job letter. We'll get to that later. Your Brave New World paper was designed to look like, a typical academic paper, something you'll write forever, as long as you're in academics. Meet assignment deadlines. That's important, yes, but the qualitative ones will give you more to talk about. For think critically, examine and evaluate genres and audience. I mean, that's pretty much what we did for the first whole part of our class, right? We were playing with different genres of writing, from philosophy to narrative, to the sort of like abstract and different genres of philosophy, from you know Socratic dialogues to the very deep Bacon-esque arguments to the soliloquies of Gibran. So think about that, and to be very honest, like, your final project is meant to show me that you can do that because you picked an audience and you picked a purpose, and you're designing around genres that will employ that, like children's books or um, TikTok videos or whatever, and then you're analyzing how your choices in the genre and who your audience is and all that led to rhetorical modes. So just think about that when you're doing this. Understanding ideology, intention, and purpose, and that's where reading about Chinese philosophy and understanding. Well, they are non-Greek. They did not have Socrates. They had a different rhetorical background, or even like somebody like Khalil Gibran, who definitely is, from Central Asia or Western Asia, and somebody who would have known about Western philosophy, but who was employing very Middle Eastern philosophical principles. And so you start to look at like, oh yeah, I definitely understood what he was coming from and how his intention to have these bigger conversations about what these things are under the auspice of a deity and how that all works. Communicate with clarity, use personal process. I did not dictate to you guys processes, and that's because it should be personal. I know how I write. I know how I work on papers. I want you to try different strategies. So we had, free writing. We had what we call graphic organizers, where you are organizing. We had outlines. We had all these different strategies. And right now, the goal is for you to figure out which ones worked for you to get a good paper out of it, and start to design a process for yourself around that. Write expository essays for a variety of purposes, which we've done. Conventions of clear, original communication, which you guys are getting if you're reading my assessments in your rubrics. Interact in diverse and complex environments. Well, I mean, most of you didn't agree with many of the perspectives being put forward by the Tao or by Khalil Gibran, or you may not have liked or agreed with not Hitch, well, Hitchens too, who was our forward author, but Huxley. So yeah, like you worked with small groups in your discussion groups, and if you're working with small groups in your final project, and hopefully, like when you working with those groups and discussions and with final projects, you were listening and being respectful and honest and giving them clear thought. So that's what those course goals are, and that's where you're gonna be working from for the big part of the paper. In the assignment, you're gonna write me a formal business letter. The business letter format link is right here. It will take you to this page, which outlines all these things, and you can see sort of the examples here. That's what it should look like. It is not an APA format. It should look like this. Notice it is left aligned, straight up and down the side here. Notice that there's double spacing between paragraphs, but there is single spacing within the paragraph. Notice how long they are. This should not be more than 2 pages, single spaced. The hope is that you condense it down so it fits on 1 page. You can see here, like they're very short. That's sort of the point. In business, like the memo you guys are writing for me, the goal is to be brief. It's to allow business to be efficient. So here you're going to be very, very efficient with your language, and we'll get into that now. So for the intro, talk to me about how you feel coming into it, right? How anxious were you in the first days when you had a online class? It might be your first online class in college. What were some of the things that I did that made it better or worse? What were some of the things that you experienced? This is where you're sort of giving me the background. In real job letters, those are those letters that you write that go along with your resume, often called letters of introduction, letters of intent, or cover letters. Your background is the first thing you're going to give, and the background there is just like your degrees, and that's what we're mimicking here. Is like you're giving me the background to your experience in the class. Trevor, during the first few days, I was lazy, I didn't do this, where I was really on top of it, but I was very anxious. Just tell me about your experience for the first few days. And what we're doing is we're trying to get to sort of past the initial experience of the class to get into the meat of it when you were actually doing labor. So talk to me about how you felt coming into class. Many of you may be running START, maybe your first days in college, some may be coming back. Here the topic is your experience in the class, and the scope is what you're feeling you're learning as you move. And so it started by like, oh, I had these anxieties, but as I moved, I started to learn these things and I felt better. And then we got into the meat of the class. And at the end of this intro, and it's personal, like that's a deal here, is you're talking to me. We now have personal pronouns back on the table. Remember in Brave New World, you were not supposed to use them because that's academic writing. So personal pronouns are back on the table here, and you're talking to me in a formal letter. Something I want to say here. I had a student once who wrote me, and I know you guys probably haven't met me before, but I tend to be very relaxed in class. I generally just wear jeans and a button-up like flannel. I'm very relaxed and comfortable. Everyone calls me Trevor. So he wrote, "Dear Trevor," that's already a problem, right? Like, informally, you can call me Trevor, but in a formal letter, you probably want to refer to me as one of my titles, right? Not that I care about them, but it's just formal, and it's what you do when you're in a formal situation. So, Dear Professor Dustin, Dear Dr. Dustin, right? Like those formal ways. So he starts with, "Dear Trevor." Then he goes on to say, "When you first walked into class, I saw you were wearing shorts and sandals, and I thought, man, this class is going to be so easy." Now, whether or not I was wearing shorts or sandals, like, doesn't matter. I wasn't wearing sandals for sure, but I might have been wearing shorts because it was in Phoenix and it was 120 degrees outside. Um, that tone is not great. He continued by saying, "And then you open your mouth." And I thought, man, this dude's on a whole nother level. Now, when he said "nother," I mean literally he had the word "nother" as an apostrophe N-O-T-H-E-R. Like, the content here is fine, right? Like the idea that, hey, dear Trevor, dear Dr. Dustin, when you walked into class, I saw you were dressed in a relaxed way, and I thought that might portend how the class might go, that you might be a relaxed teacher. And then when you started talking in your elevated academic tone and started talking about rhetoric, I became anxious because I understood immediately that you would have high expectations of us regardless of how you were dressed. That would be great, right? Like, that's a great way to introduce that. So just think about your tone here. The tone should be elevated academic English. Also remember that in the syllabus, you guys had 10% of your grade is whatever you say it is. And here's where that 10% comes from. The thesis here is the grade you give yourself. It should be a percentage grade. So your thesis, the end of your intro paragraph is going to say, during English 101, I feel I deserve a 95%, a 93%. This paper is about your ability to defend that position using the above course goals. So if you are able to prove that you deserve a 95%, great. Prove it. Show me what you did in the class that means you deserve a 95%. So there's a little bit of like honesty and sort of rhetorical balancing here about how high you ask for, considering that you then have to prove it in a very meaningful self-expression way. So just think about that. Then you're going to take that thesis statement, you're going to copy and paste it into the self-grade assignment, which literally just says copy and paste your self-grade or your thesis statement here. Please make sure it's a percentage grade, not a letter grade. It helps me when I just put those points in because I don't want to have to do the math either. Just give yourself a percentage grade. From there, you're proving it, right? You're going to body paragraphs. Something about the genre of this letter and the genre of getting jobs is, especially for big companies, the FANG companies, if you will, engineering companies, they want what's called a behavioral assessment. They want to know that you are able to do the job. So we use the STAR method. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to make a claim about something in the job ad. And our job ad is these course goals. So you might say, you know, like, oh, I demonstrate an ability to use a variety of rhetorical strategies that can be used for various writing tasks. And then you jump into STAR. And STAR stands for situation, task, action, result. And there's a little link here. You can click on the link and it tells you all about this sort of format for answering questions. You start with the claim that you can do a task, that you can achieve something. Then you prove it by looking back at something you've done that achieved that goal. So the situation you were in, the task that you were asked to achieve, like a writing assignment, a discussion forum question, a redraft, whatever that is, the action you took, and then my response, the results of that action. I got a better grade. I understood the assignment better and got points back, right? Like my discussion questions got better, whatever that is. That's the way you want to frame these paragraphs. And it's, again, efficient. I achieved this goal. Here's the situation I was in. Here's the task I was given. Here's the action I took in a few sentences. And here's what you said about the actions I took and how well I was assessed. And then you move on to another course goal. For this, remember, you're not covering all the course goals. Choose the best ones. That's where you guys really should be choosing the ones on your job ads that seem the most important, right? So if they're like, oh, do you have proficiency in Microsoft Word? That's helpful. But if like one of their top options is like, are you good at customer service? Have you negotiated terms with somebody for contracts, right? Those are much more important to them. Your ability to use Microsoft Office or Office tools should be shown in the letter you write. Address the bigger concern. So you're going to do that 2 or 3 times. So you have 2 or 3 body paragraphs. And at the end, you're going to conclude with how you feel prepared for your next assignments, for your English 102s, for your research papers that you're doing in other courses. There's a how-to guide down here that just reminds you of all this. Maybe start with a thesis where you develop what grade you deserve. If you can't do that, you start with, well, here are the course goals that I'm supposed to be able to achieve for English 101. How many do I feel I did well on? Maybe just do a mathematical analysis there and be like, okay, I can do 90% of them. I at least deserve a 90%. And then once you pick those course goals, pick the ones that put you in the best light, do situation, task, action, result for those, and then fill in the intro and conclusion. So hopefully this helps. Hopefully that's what you guys need to be successful here. It's due on the final day when everything else is due. The grading here is literally just a holistic assessment, meaning I'm not going to break it into pieces here. You're telling me what grade you deserve. Your grade on this paper is your ability to prove that you deserve that grade, and the formatting and tone that go along with that. So if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please feel free to schedule an appointment with me during our finals week. That's why my office hours are posted. If you need anything else, emails are open, Discord is open. Just reach out and I will be helpful as possible.